to the Fit and Fabulous podcast with Dr. Jaime Seaman. Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Jaime, and welcome back to the Fit and Fabulous podcast. It is so wonderful to have you back. Today on the podcast, I have Dr. Elie Jarrouge, and he is a board-certified physician in internal medicine. He was a hospitalist at a large medical center in Houston, Texas from 2013 until early 2022. As a hospitalist, his job was to take care of acutely ill patients admitted to the hospital for a myriad of medical conditions. In his early 30s, he wrestled with a host of health issues, including chronic back pain, high blood pressure, prediabetes, and was 35 pounds overweight. Sounds kind of similar to my story. After being frustrated with conventional approaches, he took a radical departure from mainstream medicine and used lifestyle to completely reclaim his health. After his personal experience and realizing the most patients who end up back in the hospital are often metabolically sick, he shifted his professional interest to focus on nutrition as his main tool to combat chronic metabolic disease, primarily obesity and type 2 diabetes. He currently coaches patients how to change their lifestyle and helps them reverse their chronic diseases and come off their medications. Dr. Jarrouge, welcome to the Fit and Fabulous podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Jaime. I'm honored to be here.
For those of you listening who don't know Dr. Jarrouge, I encourage you to go to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the social media channels, and follow him, because I've been following him since last year when somebody put me onto his content, and it's just fantastic and excellent. And I am always looking for allies here in the health space to fight the good fight, because we're up against a big battle when it comes to metabolic disease, for sure.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your background. Obviously, people know you work as a hospitalist, but why medicine? Like, take me back to your early life. Like, what inspired your career in medicine in the first place?
I'm from Lebanon, so I'm a foreigner in a sense. So as a kid, I always was interested in being a doctor for whatever reason. Everybody called me doctor, and also my grandparents used to live with us, so the doctor would pay house visits, and he would come and the portable EKG, the blood pressure machine, the medication delivery. So I was fascinated by it at the time. So from early years, I remember I used to even measure my grandmother's blood pressure with a manual cuff when I was 8 or 9. And I would.
Is this in Lebanon or in the United States?
Yeah, that's in Lebanon. Yeah. Lebanon.
Okay.
Yeah. So I love to do that. So every night I would just take the blood pressure cuff and measure it and adjust. And I didn't adjust anything. I just knew the numbers. And then as I grew up, it kind of became more and more, I was more confident that's what I wanted to do. I just liked the idea of taking care of patients or helping people. So when I had an opportunity to immigrate to the United States in late 90s, I came here after high school, and I did undergrad in New York City. I did biology major, which in hindsight, it was a big risk because I didn't have plan B. I didn't want to teach, so people do engineers and different majors.
That exact thing happened to me. I was very interested in nutrition and exercise science, and at my college, I was going to be an exercise science major, and I show up on the first day, and I'm filling out this paperwork, and they said, we have gotten rid of your program. And I was like, what do you mean? What? And they're like, you need to pick a new major. I'm like, pick a new major? And I had this moment of panic, and I was like, okay, I guess I want to do biology. And then I went home and I'm like, what am I going to do with a biology degree if I don't get into medical school? Am I going to be like studying Petri dishes all day? Like, I just had this like vision in my mind of like a biology nerd. And
yeah, exactly. I mean, in Lebanon, they go to medical school, like 7-year program right after high school, which is crazy.
So
you have
like
basically
combined.
but it's crazy to think about. You're like 17, 18, you have to know what you should be doing and then commit to medical school at that time. But I didn't know better. I thought that's what people did. So I was like, why am I doing 8 years? I could do it 7 years in Lebanon. But I figured I had to do undergrad.
There's a few programs like that in the United States. They're few and far between, but there's a couple.
Few and very selective, right? So, but I did biology because I didn't know better, and then there was no plan B, and it was very nerve-wracking when I was taking the MCATs. English was still kind of rough on me at the time, but I did that, and I made it to medical school in SUNY Buffalo, New York. So that was 2004 to 2008. So it was a good time. Again, just wanted to be a doctor. When I was applying to residency, I applied everywhere, and I came to Houston, a master to Baylor College of Medicine, and then I did internal medicine residency here. Then I wanted to be a nephrologist. I thought the physiology is cool, so I did fellowship also in kidney disease and nephrology. I never ended up practicing. I got board certified in it, but for simple reasons as like the salaries didn't make sense to me. There was a lot of work, there was very little, relatively speaking, and working at the hospital was going to be more income in less time. It was like 7 days on, 7 days off.
Yeah.
And in the county hospital, I stayed at Baylor because I knew the system and it was a good program. And the county is always fun to see all kind of cases. So started there. That was 2013, thinking I'll go back to nephrology, but never went back. And I went to kind of grew in the program as an associate program director. After a few years, switched hospitals to Baylor St. Luke's Medical Center, started a program there as an associate director, and then grew the group to about 40 doctors. But during that time, so I'll take you back. In college, when I first moved to Lebanon, I was lean, fit, like I didn't care about anything. But between college, by the time I graduated from medical school, in those 8 years, I had gained those 35 pounds slowly. And my weight was increasing, chronic back pain, sluggishness. It just kind of didn't feel good. And then after I started, right around the time I started as a hospitalist, my back would just give out. Extreme low back spasms, or be, incapacitated for a couple of weeks, sometimes sleeping on the floor. I even had a cane at one point because I couldn't stand straight. It happens.
You're like in your 30s at this point.
Yeah, similar reasons. I could be putting pants on, or could be trying to play tennis, or going to the gym, doing some sort of, some sort of tire, what do you call them? Basically jumping and doing all that stuff at the gym, trying to be healthy. It didn't work. I went to physical therapy. I went to rehab doctors. I got x-rays. There was nothing structurally wrong. And I was just gaining weight. So at that time, I thought nutrition didn't matter, really, just calories. I was gaining weight, and I was a doctor, so I think there's something wrong here. I watch my calories, I exercise, but my belly keeps growing, and my blood pressure started to develop. I thought it was genetic. My dad has high blood pressure since he was like 34, 36, so I assumed it was genetic. So it was 140s. I thought it's a matter of time before I got on medication. At that time, 2014, 2015, I came across the Whole30, Melissa Hartwig, the Whole30 program. This is how my journey started. Did a Whole30 for 1 month, then I added another month, and I lost 15, 20 pounds in those 2 months, and I felt like 80% better, amazing. So I was really shocked by how good I felt. So I decided, well, I'm good now. Let me go back to my old lifestyle. And then my back pain came back, and I didn't feel great. So I went back to it and I started looking into podcasts and social media just to kind of learn. And then I did paleo for a while. Then keto was getting popular, but I was so terrified of it. I was like, why would well, the idea of keto for me was eating a bunch of fat, really, and and very low carb. But after a year or thinking about it, then I decided to dive into it in 2018, I think. I did that for a couple of months, and then I lost another 10 pounds. I was feeling great. My ketones, I was checking ketones with a finger stick. But then I started getting a keto rash. I think I was getting deep ketosis, so that was bothering me. So I heard somebody tell me at one of the conferences that I'm probably not eating enough protein, which probably was true because I was doing like very traditional keto, very high fat, moderate to low protein. So I started switching, increasing the protein. I even went to carnivore for a few months and lost another 5 pounds. So over the years, I accumulated all these ways of every time I thought this is the way, then I found some other tool to improve it, then fasting and all that stuff. So that's how I slowly kind of evolved and started to get really annoyed in the hospital. I see the food, I see the people sick, I see everybody really getting worse and more medication. So I kind of checked out over time. I didn't care as much to be growing in the hospital medicine field, and then COVID hit, And that's when I really realized obesity, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, all these people are the ones who are dying in the hospital. And I took care of a lot of these patients. And then during this lockdown, I started this side hustle. I figured, why not? Let me just start coaching online. And
Yeah.
then over a couple of years, I somehow kind of caught on Twitter, and I started Instagram, and slowly started having more patients and clients. And eventually I just completely quit the hospital. And now that's all I do. It never feels like work. It's always fun.
Yeah. Tell me, as you're going through this personal journey of figuring out the diet, and then all of a sudden these things start getting better. Your blood pressure is getting better. Your back's not hurting. Like, these are things that you really can't deny. I mean, people
No,
will
exactly.
say this is anecdotal evidence. But as a physician, I went through something very similar. And at one point I was like, wow, we really have it all wrong. And I think you kind of, echoed that, kind of just saying, I just became disinterested in traditional medicine because
Yeah.
it really wasn't making people better. But tell me, working as a hospitalist in the hospital, when you're going through this transition, people had to notice that you were losing weight and looking better. Tell me kind of that thought process, or what did your colleagues think? Like, did you talk
Yeah.
about this openly, or did you
Uh,
try to implement this with patients in that hospitalist system?
um, Multiple questions. So first, people noticed when I was losing weight, it's like, Doc, you're losing a lot of weight. You okay? You look great. And I was like, tell them I'm just fixing my health. Colleagues, the same thing. The ones I told them I was doing keto or Whole30, some of them joke or tease me. Some of them became, take it a little bit personal. And when they see me eat healthy or not eat, they feel judged. But overall, they were supportive. Some of them got on board. They started to do it with their own health. In terms of patient care, as a hospitalist, you're not tied to 7-minute clinic visits, so it's easy. I can always go back. So I kind of became selective with the patients I have. If they're receptive, they really want to get better, I sometimes go back to their room, even often off the record. I don't record it. I would say discuss lifestyle changes, but in reality, I was actually describing to them what is diabetes, why it's a dietary problem, how they can fix it. And a lot of them, I don't know. The thing is, I couldn't tell if they follow through or not, but some of them did. Sometimes I see them back and they say, Doc, I lost 20 pounds. Thank you for your help. And so that was started to motivate me. But the turning point was this lady. We're at a transplant center for liver transplant. So this lady had liver cirrhosis well, it wasn't cirrhosis yet. It was a severe non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, to the point where
Mm.
she's getting confused, jaundice, almost cirrhosis. But they did a biopsy. It wasn't scarred. It was just inflammation. So it was reversible, but they were starting to work her up for liver transplant. And her husband at the time was there. He had quadruple bypass, and he was desperate, and she was a little confused. I told him, look, I can tell you something, not medical advice per se, but what do you have to lose? Remove sugar, fructose, don't touch the hospital food, just eat protein, healthy fats, stuff like that, very basic. And I was following them for that week, so they took it to heart. They just stopped doing it, all of that stuff. I got off service. A few months later, I decided to check in. I emailed the husband, and that's when I started getting goosebumps. It's like she's her liver completely normal right now. She lost 30, 40 pounds. They're running every day. She's not on a transplant list anymore. And it was this
Wow.
light bulb, like
I
these
got
words.
goosebumps.
Yeah, yeah. These words that are people, they were determined they didn't want a liver transplant. And she was completely confused for a week in the hospital. That turned her life around, and he got healthier and they became healthier. And that was the turning point. I was like, this is what's more powerful than any drug I can prescribe. There's no cure for fatty liver disease unless you reverse it with diet. In the transplant, you see people come back with fatty liver disease in the transplant liver after a few years. So nothing changes.
Wow.
So that was one of them: diabetes, obesity, all that stuff. So that's how I started to shift. You asked me one more question? But
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, just your colleagues' perceptions and your patients' perceptions of like trying to implement these things. I mean, I just can't wrap my mind around this, that I have seen very similar stories of people who are just so metabolically broken, and they just watched an Instagram reel or they
Yeah.
saw a YouTube video, and all of a sudden they were like, I guess what do I have to lose? I'm going to try this. And they have these amazing stories of just, and it's like they've been stuck in this hamster wheel for so long. And so
Yeah.
sometimes I just don't understand in medicine how, I mean, I really truly believe most doctors went into medicine because they they love taking care of their patients and they truly want their patients to be healthy. But then you walk through the hospital and every single, all your patients were admitted for a variety of
Right.
diagnoses,
Right.
right? But what
Right.
you're seeing is like all of them have diabetes, all of
Yeah.
them are obese. Like how we as like the healers can't give them tools to reverse these conditions, or even just be so ignorant to believe that it can't be,
Yeah.
fixed or
That's,
reversed. Like it's just mind-blowing to me.
I think medicine lost touch with, I guess, what medicine is, and we really became focused on drugs and pharmaceuticals.
Hmm.
Probably the generation before me or before that were really lost that touch. When we didn't have a lot of medicine at our disposal, we really focused on health and nutrition. I mean, if you think of type 2 diabetes before insulin, well, there wasn't much, but even type 1 diabetes, people were using dietary approaches to manage these things. And somehow we lost that. Doctors are just as unhealthy. I mean, I see them what they drink and eat in the
Yeah.
hospital. Part of it, the education system, we get brainwashed. I'll start by the thing: everybody has good intention. Doctors want to help patients. They want the best for their patients, but we learn it in a way where we think it's only drugs, only progressive. It's not going to get better. I even hated chronic diseases. One of the reasons I didn't want to do primary care or I didn't really stick to nephrology because I didn't want to deal with chronic diseases. I figured I couldn't do anything for them. But once I realized you can reverse it, I was like the most exciting field I can be in, just to help people. But yeah, I think people lost. I guess they lost hope. They don't think they have time. They also make assumptions that the patients are not going to change. There's so many different things. Education, definitely. They don't teach us nutrition. Biochemistry, if we actually think about it, biochemistry makes sense that this lifestyle we follow, you and I, make more sense than what ends up being translating into dietitians and nutrition in the hospital. So
Yeah,
I think,
I definitely resonate with the personal reflection of, us as doctors and in, my social media. I have said this repeatedly, like we are just as human as our patients. And I really, just like you, want to be the example for them and not just like the person that talks the, talk and more walks the walk. But I think that there was a time when I was in medicine and I had prediabetes and I had hypothyroidism, and I'm sitting there telling patients, well, clean up your diet and exercise more, but then you always finish it with like, yeah, I know it's hard and I know you've got kids, and it's like you're spoon feeding them all the excuses that you spoon feed yourselves because,
yeah,
we always look through this lens, which is our own vulnerabilities. And I think that you're totally right. Like doctors work long hours many times. It's not rewarding, it's exhausting. Um, and it's just easier to write a prescription. Okay, come back in 30 days and we'll check your blood pressure again. Okay, let's increase your medication, because the time it takes. I mean, I'm sometimes sitting there in the clinic room staring at the patient and I'm going, they are so far out of touch with where they need to
yeah.
be. This is going to take me this is going to take me
Weeks.
3 hours
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
to just
exactly.
like wrap their mind around it, so it's like and you're right, we're not taught about nutrition, we're not taught about any of these lifestyle things in which those are the primary interventions for like every single problem.
Yeah,
I mean, it's mind-blowing to me. Okay, so let's talk about a lot of times low carb and ketogenic diets. People get on social media and they just say like, well, if it's weight loss, it's just counting calories. And you kind of, alluded that you had been in that mind frame before. Can you talk about what are like non-scale victories for people who
mm,
are doing like low carb and ketogenic diets?
yeah. Where do I start? How long do we have? So, well, it starts from skin, mood, lifting skin, clearing up from different acne and rashes and eczema and psoriasis. You see that happen. Mental clarity, all these, people feel high energy. They don't need to nap. They feel rested. gut issues kind of disappear, anxiety, depression. I've seen all of that. Acid reflux is a huge one, like GERD that kind of also disappears. So a lot of people, they're feeling better in every other aspect before the scale moves. Fatty liver melting away, diabetes, blood glucose quickly improving. There's so many more autoimmune diseases. I've seen rheumatoid arthritis, and I mean, I don't deal
Yeah.
with a lot of them, but I've seen psoriatic arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, general pains that kind of completely disappear after a few weeks. Hunger goes away, cravings go away. So what people didn't think they could do because they thought it requires willpower to control their calories. Now they eat right and the calories take care of themselves because you're satiated, you're full. So many non-scale victories, and the scale happens eventually, sooner or later.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think you kind of said you started with Whole30 and then did paleo and then started cutting out carbohydrates and then kind of increased protein. So there was this kind of gradual evolution of your diet. And I was very similar in that regard. But, I think people will say, okay, as long as they just cut out the processed foods and they're just eating a whole food diet, right? So talk to me about when you work with patients one-on-one, Whole30 versus paleo versus low carb or ketogenic, or carnivore, like where do you find that people are really the most successful?
When I don't call it a diet of any sort, I think I just tell people, look, you're sick because of this junk processed food. So the goal is to move back to natural whole foods. And then I told them I'm biased towards animal-centric whole food diet, higher protein, lower carbohydrates, and natural fats, however, come with the diet. So I try not to label it. Sometimes they try to label, is this Atkins? Is this keto? Is this, well, I told them, yes, you are in ketosis when you drop the carbs, but really I want to find a sustainable lifestyle. And then I call it carnivore for sure when people have autoimmune diseases or they're really stuck and I go all the way just only meat. That's where it is. But I try to remove these labeling for these patients because they have a hard time explaining it. When they take keto to their doctor, they freak out. When they say, so I tell them, like, you're removing sugar, processed, mostly refined carbohydrates, and eating more protein. So I try to keep it in that general framework to make it more palatable for people.
Yeah, I mean, a whole food diet can look like a whole bunch of different
Yeah,
ways,
exactly.
right? They could be vegan, they could be carnivore, they could be Mediterranean, right? Like they're
Yeah.
still whole food diets. So, um, let's talk about if somebody is like, okay, I've got they're listening right now. I've got diabetes, I'm 85 pounds overweight, I've got high blood pressure. What labs do you think are kind of like the basic starting point for people to like check and know where they're at with their metabolic health?
Oh, absolutely. One, you need something called a comprehensive metabolic profile, which looks at your kidney function and liver function, because a lot of times you have fatty liver disease. You want to make sure that's okay. You look at fasting glucose. You also get a hemoglobin A1C to see how bad the diabetes is, which is an average number for previous 3 months. I like to look at fasting insulin to see how much insulin it's requiring to control that glucose, especially if they're not yet diabetic. I look at the inflammation, and I like the CRP, generally C-reactive protein. I like the HS, high sensitivity CRP. It picks even, it's more sensitive. I look at vitamin D. I look at the uric acid. It's more of a recent thing. I realize it's really a window to metabolic health that may not show up otherwise. Thyroid function. What else? B12. I'm surprised how many people are low in B12
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, all these numbers, I think that kind of everybody should get them, kind of assess where they're starting from.
Yeah. Let's talk about the lipid panel because
Oh, the
this is
lipid. Sorry, that was
usually,
new. Like the
yeah,
lipid panel is one of the major ones
this is
too.
usually where patients come in and they said, well, I told my doctor I was on a ketogenic diet and my LDL cholesterol is 150 and they want to put me on a statin and now I don't know what to do. Can you tell people what happens with lipids with low carbon ketogenic diets?
Yes, so that's highly debatable, and I don't think it's going to be settled anytime soon when it comes to LDL, the bad cholesterol. But when you look at risk for cardiovascular disease and state of metabolic health is really what more correlates with health is triglycerides and HDL. What I see on a low carb diet is usually triglycerides just plummet, and then HDL shoots up, and that's a good sign. Now LDL can go sideways, can go up, can go down. It's really not predictable. Although the leaner people are, the higher the LDL that I see. People worry. I get more questions about LDL than anything else. And my answer to them, look, I can tell you my opinion. There's not enough science to say, but generally, if you're metabolically healthy, LDL does not really correlate well with cardiovascular disease. So you have to look at the whole picture. And then you make your judgment. I tell them, look, your traditional doctor is always going to be worried, and then meanwhile, they probably want to push the statin on you. I tell you, you can take it, but the benefit is very minimal. You can have a lot of side effects, including diabetes, which is ironic. You can do other things to mitigate it. Like, I like the calcium scan, coronary artery calcium scan. So I tell them if your calcium scan is very low or zero, you really don't have to worry about it. But I told him it's unsettled science and there's research ongoing. David Feldman, I told him he's an engineer who's doing more research on that topic than anybody else.
Yeah. So I have a very vested interest in this because my own husband had an elevated coronary calcium scan in his mid-30s, and his grandfather dropped dead at age 52. So some people may have seen a recent little reel that BioCoach showed. I haven't talked about it really on my podcast or anything, but Dave Feldman, who Dr. Jarrouge is referring to, is an engineer who is studying this lean mass hyperresponder population. So people that do a low carb ketogenic diet and the LDL goes up, and that's really the only isolated problem on their lab. So like what Dr. Jarrouge is saying is fasting insulin's normal, fasting glucose is normal, triglycerides are low, HDL is high, A1C looks good, their blood pressure looks good. All of these things are normal. And the only problem that they have is this elevation in LDL, which has been really vilified as a major driver of atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease. So Dr. Jarrouge wasn't at Low Carb Denver, so I'll lead you guys on to a little bit of what Dave has started to discover. And I really think this is gonna rip the Band-Aid off a little bit on this conversation. So they enrolled 100 people into this trial. And there's going to be some pre-publication data that's coming out. So Dave really couldn't tell us everything at Low Carb Denver. But what I'll tell you, what he did tell us is the average age, it was about 55. And there was more men than women, which is a good thing, because if you were just to pluck these people out of the population, a bunch of 55-year-old guys, you should be able to find some atherosclerosis, right? And they all had low triglycerides. They all had like a really good average HDL. The average LDL of the 100 people was something like 256. So we're talking like high LDL numbers. The average time they had been on a ketogenic diet was like 4.5 years. And they were doing baseline, what we call CCTA scans. So even more advanced than a coronary calcium scan, you can actually see soft plaque. So they scanned these 100 people to start this trial last year, and they chose 15 spots in the heart, and then they gave each spot in the heart a score 0 to 3. So minimum, lowest score you could get was 0. Highest score you could get was a 45. And Dave was kind of like pulling the audience. He's like, so we didn't know what we were going to find, right? Are we going to find really high scores and have to stop the trial totally? Or are we going to find somewhere in the middle and not know what to do? And so out of these 100 people, almost all of them, 100%, had a score less than 10, which is incredible, right? Yeah. So this is really incredible that there's not even calcified plaque, there's not even soft plaque there. And these people have sky-high LDLs. And this is very similar to a population of people that have familial hypercholesterolemia, but these people have abnormal lipid metabolism. So they do get atherosclerosis, and there's little kids having heart attacks like at age 5, right? They look very similar on paper, but the difference is in the metabolic health, like that the metabolism is actually functioning correctly, even though the LDL is high. So for people listening, I just had to plug that in there because I haven't talked about it on any podcast yet. And I need to have Dave back on to talk about it after he finally
Yeah.
publishes some of this stuff, because it's gonna get a lot of talk, in the lipidology world. I think there's gonna be a few doctors whose heads are spinning with this information, but I just want people to know that there are a population of people where LDL goes up, and it may not be necessarily a bad thing, but you have to look at the individual and what the risks are, and all that. So that's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, talk to us about the connection between salt and blood pressure, because when I was in medical school, I was told restrict salt, definitely less than 2 grams a day, because it causes high blood pressure.
I was told that in medical school, in residency, in fellowship, in nephrology training, which is supposed to be like the expert in salt. In the hospital, heart failure patients, they always push for these 2 gram sodium. Patients always felt lousy. It never worked. I always believed it. I used to eat low salt. My dad used to eat low salt, until I realized that the kidney actually has also insulin receptors. And then it does one of its many functions is drive sodium absorption, salt absorption through the kidney. So when this insulin is running very high all the time, it's not in a balanced state. So you have more salt absorption, and to keep the same concentration, water follows. So you always have more fluid retention. And when you have more fluid in a closed tank, your pressure gonna go up. The other thing, insulin also works on the smooth muscles inside the arteries, and the arteries may thicken or get stiffer. And that adds to it as well. So, and as I work with clients, with myself, first of all, blood pressure dropped. Even my dad, he was on 6 classes of blood pressure medicine over 28 years. When
Wow.
a year and a half ago,
Six meds, and you
six
couldn't get it
classes,
normal.
yeah.
Six
Some of them
meds.
are combinations, yeah. 6 classes, and he was still running 140s, 150s. He wouldn't change his diet. One time he was visiting me here. I locked him with me for 5 weeks, and I completely put him on a basically very low carb, high protein diet. And just with me, within 5 weeks, I took him off 2, 3 medications. But over a span of a year, he's down to one blood pressure medicine. He's 69 now, and he was on 28 years of high blood pressure. You'd think it's irreversible. So I think that last pill could be because of all the damage. I can't get rid of that last pill.
Yeah.
But generally, got from 6 to, and he lost. It's not like he lost a ton of weight. He wasn't severely overweight, but he lost like 20 pounds. It's not like a huge amount. So basically, salt is not the cause of hypertension. With rare exceptions, some people are salt sensitive, but it's salt retention. So I differentiate salt as a cause versus salt retention as a problem. And what drives salt retention is really sugar, carbohydrates, anything that's really keeps spiking that insulin, keeps driving. And that's what, when you see people, they're on a clean diet and then they go a few days off the plant and they gain 7 pounds, 8 pounds. I mean,
we've all done it on vacation.
Yeah, we all do it on vacation. It's crazy. It's that fluid shift, how you, I mean, part of it is glycogen increase, but also a lot of it, I think, is just insulin spiking, holding on to fluids. And some people come to me and say, wrists are swollen, their rings are tight. So, there's fluid retention. So from there.
Yeah, I remember when I was the year my husband and I were engaged to be married, I was planning my wedding, and I was like trying to diet, just counting calories, like eating lean cuisine meals. I'm telling you guys, it was horrible.
It was horrible.
But my parents, we went on like a family reunion, a cruise, like to an Alaskan cruise. And cruises, you guys, there's like amazing food everywhere, like all you can eat, unlimited. So my fiance at the time, my husband, and I go on this cruise and we just eat like whatever we want. And I came home and I went to a bridal dress fitting for my wedding dress. I had gained 12 pounds. I was gone less than 7 days. Okay. Yikes. It's obviously not 7 pounds of fat, but tons of fluid retention because just all this like processed food and all this insulin. And I mean, the standard American diet is 50 to 60% carbohydrates. And then these processed foods, of course, have a lot of, added sodium. I don't know if you saw this, Dr. Jarrouge, there was a JAMA article that came out just this last week that the American government now is trying to approve processed food manufacturers to use salt alternatives, and they're trying to encourage them to use sodium salt alternatives in these, processed foods.
Nothing surprises me anymore. It's sad because a lot of people, schools, nursing homes, the people who really need proper nutrition, they're getting, pigeonholed into following a really horrible diet. I mean, the other side of the salt is actually realize you actually need more salt when you're on a low carb diet. My dad had to eat a lot more salt. I eat a lot more salt. If I don't, actually, I feel lousy. So you get headaches and cramps. So a lot of people start realizing that as well. So salt is important. But when you combine carb and salt, you're really probably making it worse. But generally, if you cut carbs, you will fix the problem.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit, you're from Lebanon. Your parents still live in Lebanon?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Give us a little bit of perspective between Lebanese diet versus American diet, and also a compare and contrast with their medical systems.
Oh, well, first of all, the American standard American diet has kind of made waves into the rest of the world.
All
When
the
I was
other
growing
countries.
up, food was basically a lot of meat and chicken and lamb, goat, a lot of dairy, a lot of vegetables, tabbouleh, and a lot of beans as well. But generally, it was very rich in protein and fats, olive oil, and bread was there. But some of the old bread used to be thin and doesn't affect you the same way.
So
Everybody
it's not
looked
like
healthy.
American, everyone, I've never been to Lebanon, but people always talk about how like European bread is not like they can go
Yes.
there and eat that bread and it doesn't do the same things that American bread does.
Exactly, and that's what when I'm growing up, the people in the class, in my class, or you see that overweight, they would stand out. They would be rare, two, maybe three max in
Mm,
the class. When I left, and now I came back. When I left, McDonald's was starting to making it in junk food like Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks. Now you start having. I didn't know what a donut it was or a muffin when I came to the U.S. Back in 2000, but now everybody eats that. And so unfortunately the diet has shifted, and the kids and parents that work for, a lot of parents are working, and the kids are starting to eat more and more junk food, and you start to see childhood obesity, all that stuff.
wow.
Now, the medical system is actually not good there. There's no like healthcare system. Some people are privately insured. It's very expensive relatively for people there. Uh, but the focus is still medications and all that stuff. Diabetes, obesity is on the rise, but it's unfortunate because we used to be such a healthy population.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I went down to South America to Chile this last year and I was mind blown. Like going through the downtown, I'm like, oh, there's Wendy's, there's
yeah,
McDonald's,
yeah,
there's KFC. I mean, it was just all the American places down there. It was like, I was mind blown.
yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah.
It's sad.
It's like a cancer spreading across the world. Talk to us about fat. So obviously, reducing carbs in the diet. Obviously, you're a fan of higher protein, but you're eating a lot more fat than a standard American diet or this low fat dogma that we've all been told. Are there fats that people shouldn't eat?
So if you look at I guess the science is still debatable, depending who you talk to. But generally, I believe, and I think there's enough information that seed oils, anything that's not natural, like animal fat is natural. Olive oil and avocado oil, you squeeze a fruit. Coconut oil, you squeeze something, you get natural fat out of it. That's, I think, is perfectly healthy. At worst, it's neutral. There's no evidence that saturated fats. The more you pull more real research, you don't find any evidence of detrimental effect. Seed oils, on the other hand, these are highly processed, manufactured, require a lot of chemicals and solvents. They're unstable. Omega 6, when in high amount, it can be pro-inflammation. And that can contribute directly, indirectly to insulin resistance. Although it's not a carbohydrate, it can really affect that in the liver. So I choose to believe that there is, first of all, it doesn't taste good. It's highly unstable. I recommend against seed oils in general and stick to olive oil, avocado oil, coconut, and any animal fat, from bacon fat to tallow, lard, butter. Butter is delicious and the most, and avoid fake butters, margarine, all that stuff. I really try to get people away from.
Yeah, I remember when I was getting my degree in nutrition, Plantterols, like so the margarine and things like that were just the rage. And now I just like cringe
Yeah,
walking through the grocery store because when you look at the ingredients, it's canola oil, it's soybean oil, it's these oils, and they're pervasive in the processed food industry. One thing I learned my family went on spring break recently to Maui, and my husband and I went on a chocolate tour of this cacao farm. And we're on this tour, and they're showing us how they hand harvest the cacao beans, and they, ferment them under banana leaves. And then they showed us this jar of these cacao. And what happens is the cocoa butter, when they kind of chop it up into nibs, the cocoa butter starts coming out, which is a plant fat. It's actually really high in stearic acid. But they told us that the commercial chocolate factories in the United States of America, you know what they do? They pull the cacao butter out of the chocolate and they sell it to the cosmetic industry, right? Because everyone wants to put cocoa butter on their skin.
Yeah.
And they replace it with vegetable oil. So all the chocolate candy bars that you eat at Halloween, it is vegetable oil and sugar. It's not even real chocolate. They take the cacao butter out of there.
Sugar is like number one or two ingredient. Yeah, it's crazy.
Insane.
It's funny you mentioned that because I went to a local store to get cacao butter to make my own chocolate. I was kind of wanted to experiment. I went to Paris and I was in love with the chocolate there. I said, let me try to make my own clean several ingredients. I couldn't find the cacao butter, and they led me to the beauty section, and I
lotion aisle.
So it was basically pieces of cacao butter in a weird location. I was like, that makes sense now.
Yeah, it's just I was like, wow, that's just crazy, because they can make more money by selling the cacao butter to the cosmetic industry to rub on your skin instead of eating. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think that what it does is it changes the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. It makes it pro-inflammatory. You heat them, you eat fried food with them, so they're easily oxidized. Yeah, I mean, I think inherently polyunsaturated fats, from a walnut or from a whatever, they're not that bad. But I think it's just that we eat less seafood, we eat less omega-3s, we added these omega-6s in, and it just starts to create this really horrible imbalance.
And I tell people, even if it doesn't hurt you, let's say it doesn't hurt you, but removing seed oils, you basically remove all junk food and processed food. So because it's an ingredient in anything processed, so that's another way to remove it. So even mayonnaise, I tell them just change that.
Oh yeah. And even if you look at the one that says like avocado oil mayonnaise, oh no, turn it around. It's probably like
it's probably
50% avocado and then another 50% soybean oil.
Oh yeah.
They're always looking for cheaper ingredients to put in there, but they just slap these pretty labels. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this whole plant-based movement? Because I feel like in medicine, that's what I hear. Patients are like, my doctor says to eat a plant-based diet. I don't even know what that means, but
I'm still trying to figure it out, but it looks like a common theme. I don't think they know what it means when the doctors. So I had patients that had a colonoscopy and they had polyps. They tell them don't eat red meat, eat more plants. If they have heart disease, they tell them that. If they have diabetes, they tell them don't eat meat. I was like, do you even know what sugar? I mean, how are you going to raise your sugar eating meat versus not eating the carbohydrates? So it seems like just a common advice for whatever the condition is, and move people away from animal protein. I don't think the doctor know. They think they mean well, but I think the agenda behind it, whatever organizations behind it, is really driving this twofold. One, false data that's based on epidemiology. It doesn't really correlation and causation and what they eat. It's really terrible. There's no good randomized trial that would tell you meat is unhealthy. The other thing, I forgot who said it, but an Asian food cannot be cause of modern diseases. So I really don't believe that something was eaten problem thousands and thousands of years that's suddenly causing us to be sick. And cancer is known to be fueled by sugar, insulin, hyperinsulin state. When you look at statistics, diabetes, obesity, all that stuff, is the odds ratio of getting cancer, heart disease is many, many times fold higher than any particular like food or anything like that. So I think it's all bad advice, and unfortunately, they're hurting the patients by giving that advice. Now, can you be plant-based and healthy? Yes, but most people aren't. I think if you eat a whole food plant-based diet and you choose to that lifestyle, it's doable. It's just very hard to stick to the macros and getting enough nutrients, bioavailable nutrients. The protein in the plant is not as bioavailable. The vitamins in the plants are not as bioavailable. You miss some vitamins. So People who want to do it, I tell them it's you can be healthy. I'm just not the right person for you to advise you. Um,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
try to discourage that.
I have a huge problem with it because as an OBGYN, people who want to get pregnant, I'm not saying you can't, you be quote unquote plant-based, whatever that means. It's not vegan, vegetarian, but it's somehow like that. There are a lack of nutrients. I mean, people think when you eat the rainbow that you're getting this plethora of nutrients, but the bioavailability of these things is much less. And when you look at the nutrients required in a pregnancy, the amount of grains and carbohydrates that you would have to eat to get that amount of nutrients is at the cost of more calories. And
Yeah.
I mean, calories do matter. I'm not going to say that calories in, calories out
Right. Right.
is not a thing. It is, but I just think it's not the most optimal way to achieve, good metabolic health. But
And you see gestational diabetes and
it's my opinion.
yeah, no,
Yeah. Yeah.
again, we're entitled to our opinion, and I agree with you. And when I see or hear of pregnant women who gain 50, 80 pounds or get gestational diabetes, I have a hard time believing that's just because it's a pregnancy. I think a lot to do, yes, hormonal, but the diet is fueling that. You're already in an insulin resistant state as a pregnant
Yeah.
woman, naturally to have things go to the baby, but then you make
Yeah.
things worse.
How I like to think of it is, listen, like in the Three Little Pigs, the wolf is going to come and he is going to blow your house down. And if your house is built of hay or rocks or paper or bricks, it's going to make a difference. So, there's always some level of susceptibility. We know that even just in the offspring of these women. But yeah, the metabolic health coming into pregnancy really sets the stage for the bad outcomes that can sometimes happen. So let's talk about kids for a
Mhm.
second. I saw a post of yours on Instagram just trashing kids menus, and oh my god, I read recently that childhood obesity rates are almost like 20%
Yeah.
in the United States. Did you you were internal medicine. I mean, did you see kids in the hospital or take care of kids at
No,
any
it wasn't
point?
a pediatric hospital, so I didn't have a lot of interaction with. In medical school, a little bit when I was on a pediatric rotation, but
Yeah.
generally no. But you don't need to. You just go to any restaurant, or coffee shop, or playground. You can see that kids these days are not healthy looking. I mean, they're overweight, and a lot of them are on their iPads and they're eating junk food.
Yeah, I mean, I've got three kids of my own, and you go and like the kids menu, it's like $3.99. There's a reason it's cheap because
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
mostly pasta. It's like spaghetti, mac and cheese, chicken fingers,
Just
chicken
carb
nuggets.
overload, carb overload,
Yeah.
and cereal overload. There's zero nutrients. I forgot what I think statistics. I think it's 66% of calories for kids and adolescents is coming from junk food. That's scary. I read it several times. I didn't go to the source, but I think some report that said that, and I believe it. I mean, whether it's parents sometimes mean well when they, give them juice and chocolate milk and
Well,
all
that's the
that kind
thing.
of.
You get a kids meal and it's like an alternative to the French fries is like yogurt or oranges, but then you get the yogurt and it's this sugar fortified strawberry yogurt, or you get the oranges and it's mandarin oranges in high fructose corn
It's corn
syrup.
syrup, yeah.
Like it's like but you think it's healthier because they're
Yeah.
eating oranges and they're eating fruit or they're eating strawberry yogurt and then add the chocolate milk or the apple juice or like whatever it is. It's insane.
And fatty liver and diabetes, type 2 diabetes is as young as 3 years old. That's been happening.
Yeah, and
It
now we're
should be an
seeing
emergency, like
recommendations.
yeah,
Now we're seeing, recommendations for GLP-1 medications or gastric
yeah.
bypass
Guess
surgery as primary for children.
I can't believe they say it with a straight face and as if like, I mean, how can they even think that's okay? I don't know.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary because, when you look at these graphs, the people, I can't put them up on my screen right now, but when you look at these graphs, so just so you guys know, we're shifting into the semen analysis now because I pulled this. I was trying to find the most recent data because I had heard recently that the childhood obesity rates were basically nearing 20%, which was mind blowing to me, but of course at the same time not surprising. But this was written up in the Global Pediatric Health Journal, and it's titled Childhood Adolescent Obesity in the United States, a Public Health Concern. But what's crazy is when you look at the breakdown of the children, even kids as young as, I mean, we're talking, they're saying school age children. So even like 6-year olds, 18.4% rate of obesity. 2 to 5-year olds, they're not even in school, 13.9% obesity. But when you look at the graphs over time as to when did childhood obesity start to become a problem, it mimics the adult data, which is in the 1980s when the United States Dietary Guidelines came out. And if you follow me on social media recently, I shared the USDA, the largest funding comes from some of the biggest food manufacturers in the United States. And it was around that time that we vilified fat. So we pulled saturated fat out. We told people to eat low fat diets. We started increasing plant fats in the diet if there was any. But what we did is we just replaced all those calories with carbohydrates, six to 11 grains per day. You guys know what that food pyramid looked like. It was right at the bottom, 6 to 11 grains per day. And it's not slowing down. And, we're eating less red meat than we were back then. And we're seeing more cancer and more diabetes and more obesity. So people really need to open their eyes to this conversation, because my personal opinion, and I don't know what yours is, but we have to start to take self accountability. And then once we figure it out for ourselves, we need to address our family unit. It has to start at home. It has to start within the family, because our healthcare system is not going to fix these.
Yeah. I mean, I tell people all
Yeah.
the time, your health is your responsibility, 100%. Nobody's going to come save you. I mean, if anything, doctors blame patients for non-compliance, where they may be compliant, just with the wrong advice. Sure, some patients are non-compliant, but I think, yes, you got to put your oxygen on first, fix your own health, look at your family, take care of them. You really have to change the structure. We're turning kids into addicts. When kids throw tantrums and they won't eat real food, they just want the junk food. That's our own doing. Kids, unless you introduce them to sugar, that wouldn't happen. And then you look at the restaurants in the morning, like there's no proteins, no whole foods. There's just a bunch of carbohydrates and sugar and pancakes and syrups and juices. I mean, and no wonder kids have tantrum issues, have ADHD, have all kind of behavioral issues. It is a healthcare crisis, not a concern, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a mental health crisis amongst our youth too. And we know people with diabetes and obesity, they have more depression, they have more anxiety. Metabolic disease is not just obesity and diabetes. I love, you guys go listen to my episode with Chris Palmer that we recently had on his new book called Brain Health. I think that is the next wave of where we really need to focus our attention, on mental health as a metabolic disease. I know myself, going through this, when I had hypothyroidism and prediabetes, all related to my insulin resistance. I mean, I had real bad postpartum depression. I mean, my 1 hour glucose test in my second pregnancy was over 200.
Wow.
Like, how do you take care of a new baby when your blood sugars are horrible and you're using tons of insulin? And I mean, how can you possibly feel, good? How can you possibly feel motivated to go work out and, do stuff with your kids? Like the consequences and the ripple effect within your life of just eating a poor diet it's widespread. It
It's
affects
crazy.
every area of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell
Yeah.
people it's hard to be healthy. It's hard to be unhealthy. So might as well be healthy. It's hard at first. You gotta have to be conscious. And when you wake up and see the change in your health, you really change, and you never go back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Dr. Jarrouge, this has been just a really fun conversation.
Awesome.
Obviously, I am a huge fan of what you do. Tell people where they can find you or where they can work with you, because I know you're working, with patients
Yeah.
one-on-one now.
Yeah. I'm on Twitter, handle Elie Jarrouge MD, and I'm on Instagram, Eli_Jarrouge. I'm not on Facebook. I have a private account I don't use. I can't handle too many social media. I have a
I
website,
hear you.
metabolichealthmd.com. If you can schedule a discovery call free if you were interested in working with me one-on-one. I focus on weight issues, diabetes, high blood pressure. I just want people to know that it doesn't matter how long you've had diabetes, obesity, or any chronic disease. If you're not dead, it's never too late. I've had people on insulin for 20 years come off medications within a few months. So it's really doable. You just have to believe it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, this has been incredible. And, for the listeners out there, if you got into this part of the podcast, thank you for listening to the entire thing. But please share this episode with somebody. Share this episode with somebody who needs help, because this information is not widely available. And the conversation that we had today is not happening in the clinic rooms.
No,
It's not. And it's going to take each and every one of us to push back against, the agenda that's happening right now, because it's our lives and it's our health. And at the end of the day, I agree with you. The only thing you can't fix is death.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Awesome.
it's very true. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. We will catch you on the next episode. Did you guys love that last episode of the Fit and Fabulous podcast? Well, of course you did. And I want to keep bringing you the most amazing content from the most incredible people. And you can help me by subscribing to the Dr. Fit and Fabulous channel. You guys know where the button is. Just click it. It's the doctor's orders.